I'm meteorologist Joe Cioffi, and we are going to take a look at what's going on with Jose and the new weather models, or at least the beginning of the new weather model cycle, and we're going to see what's left with Irma, because that is still a player in here in terms of the overall scheme of things. And we're going to start with the satellite loop right now, and you can see the three systems. Irma has basically spread itself out now as a post-tropical system, and you've got the reflection of the circulation actually still heading westward, and at the same time you've got some tropical moisture coming up from the south in the form of some high clouds and even some rain into the western Carolinas and Virginia, but that's all kind of arcing northwest. You've got a storm, a non-tropical system that has a pretty good-looking swirl of clouds around it near the middle, and that's southeast of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, and those areas, well, eastern Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, getting the arm of moisture sweeping up from the south. But you can see that it's basically it's not a tropical system unless something were to develop near the core of the circulation, which every once in a while, even in these higher latitudes, if they're close enough to the Gulf Stream, that could happen and has happened. And in between all that, you have Hurricane Jose. And we talked about the fact that Jose was going to be basically in a no man's land. So you've got the upper flow that is around Irma. You've got the upper flow that is around this system east of Newfoundland. And Jose is kind of stuck in the middle. There's a ridge of high pressure in between those two in the upper layers of the atmosphere. So all we're seeing Jose doing is kind of drifting off toward the east at a very, very slow speed. I'll just take a look at some of the radars at the moment. We'll go to the U.S. radar and show you with respect to the rain. You can see that actually rain is now back southwestward into Arkansas, Mississippi, and northwestern Louisiana, which is odd. But this is what's happened to the circulation as it just kind of, broadens out. You've got this big arm of showers, big in terms of the distance, that comes in from off the Carolinas into western Virginia and then back into southern Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Much of this rain is not especially heavy in that arm. There are some heavier pockets of rain back here closer to what's the remnant circulation of Irma, but that's just about it. And gradually, this is all going to weaken out. I'm seeing we still have, one last tight satellite loop here of the visible, and you can see the rotation here of the clouds. Weather conditions, of course, have improved across Florida and southern Georgia and into South Carolina. And by the way, as a result of all this cloud cover and rain from the tropical system, temperatures in that part of the country are averaging we're averaging 10 to 20 degrees below normal yesterday. So it really cooled things down quite a bit. Not that it was especially hot, but it does create a bit of an anomaly in the temperature profile in the atmosphere when you have clouds and rain like this in the south. So I'm going to now we'll jump over to Jose, and you can see it here on its satellite loop. I'll give it a quick refresh, and we'll let that load up. So it might just take a minute or two here. And it's cooperating today. We can see that kind of just looks like this amorphous blob at the moment. It really is not that impressive. It is undergoing some northerly shear from the outflow of that broad circulation between Irma and actually the ridge that's building over it is creating northerly circulation. Northerly shear. This is what happens when I try to talk to you guys and do weather at the same time. I'm not the most ambidextrous person in the world, but this is going to be a problem for Jose in terms of maintaining itself over the next day or two. Is that shear is going to continue for a little while, and then gradually the shear may wind up relaxing later on in the period. But a lot of times with these systems, you get the shear in there, and it seems to get out of the models forecast it to get out of the way, but oftentimes it is very, very slow to do so. So why don't we now take a look at the forecast tracks. That was Irma's, and they're actually still, I don't know if they're still producing them or not, but let me just find the forecast tracks for Jose, and you can have them here. These are the newer models, and except for the two models, and one of them, I'm sorry, another one, the UKMET model, the British model, which is oftentimes pretty good. And actually, even today's run of the NAM model show more of a westward track. But there's a hitch on the NAM model, and that is it's showing a much weaker system. And we'll take a look at that in a second. If Jose winds up weakening into a tropical storm, and judging by its appearance, it's certainly possible, it will respond to the flow in the lower levels of the atmosphere rather than the higher levels. So that might be the reason why it would favor a more westward track. But it would, again, it would be with a much weaker system. And some of the intensity guidance reflects that. The vast majority of the hurricane tracking models keep this have it doing this loop, moving west and west-northwest, and then taking a track out to sea. And I said last night that to me seemed like the most favorable outcome. But we still have variables to contend with in terms of what's going to happen. And if you remember from yesterday, I showed you these two upper air maps of the GFS, and one of them, the one that says 132-hour forecast, they're both for the same time, which is 8 p.m. Sunday. But this is the one that says 132-hour forecast. This is the earlier run, and from yesterday afternoon, and this one is from last night, last night's model run. And even though they look the same, the difference is the important difference is the presence of this trough that's along the New England coast, which you don't really see too much of on the earlier run, and it's that trough that opens up a weakness. Just enough of a weakness for Irma to respond to. The other question is the upper high that's going to be in the Atlantic. Is that upper high going to be stronger? And now, of course, the third variable in this equation is going to be, what kind of system is Jose going to be? Because maybe if it weakens to a tropical storm, it could wind up trending a bit more to the left or to the west. If it winds up being perhaps a minimal hurricane or a bit stronger, it may respond to the winds at the higher levels of the atmosphere and respond to that trough weakness that's up off the northeast coast. So let's start off with today's NAM model, and we'll examine what it has to say. And I'm going to just get you the tight region. We can go to the eastern region so you can see the whole east coast with this, if it ever will load, and there it goes. Okay, so you can follow the time frame up on the top, and remember that's in Greenwich time. So if you're in the east, you want to subtract 4 hours from it. So 00Z is 8 o'clock in the evening. Even though it's a 00Z Thursday, that's midnight Thursday. That's Greenwich, England Mean Time. And for the East Coast, subtract 4 hours, and for the other time zones, you guys just didn't know what to do. So here we have Jose in the southeast corner, just kind of sitting there. We're now into Wednesday evening, and it starts to kind of meander back westward, and there we are. This is for Friday night. So the motion on the NAM is kind of west-northwest to almost west. I'll go back about a few frames so you can see it again. And see, it's kind of west-northwest to westward, depending on, there's these jumps that go up and down, up and down. But notice it's a weaker system. The pressure on it is over 1,000 millibars. So that would suggest that it would be a tropical storm and not a hurricane. And if you look at how the radar echoes are lined up, they're not compact near the center. It looks like, the sort of amorphous comma, and has a much less organized look. So the NAM is suggesting that there'll be a weaker system there, and that will respond to more of the lower level flow and push it toward the west. Now, if you look at the upper air, there is a trough here in the northeast. And actually, the NAM has a much healthier looking presence of that trough than the GFS does. The main jet stream goes up across the northern plains and the northern Great Lakes into Canada, but the remnants of Irma, the upper air reflection of the remnants of Irma, are still hanging around. So the flow from North Carolina northward is southwest out in the Atlantic Ocean. And then you have this upper high, and that's the border of that upper high runs from just east of the Bahamas and then kind of comes down through the Bahamas over Cuba, then back into the Gulf of Mexico, and then from there northeast. So Jose is kind of trapped in this white area that's east of the Bahamas. It's right underneath the ridge, and the ridge is cradling it. And being that it would be a weaker system, again, with that high the way it's built, if it's responding to steering winds at the lower levels of the atmosphere, that could be the reason why the NAM, which is only goes to 84 hours, is showing us that more of a west motion. Now we're going to jump to the GFS, the new GFS, and we'll start with the surface, and we should have it out far enough we'll certainly have it out as much as the NAM does, and we'll take a look at the trend of the GFS, and I'll put the surface on first. Okay, so we're starting at current time. It does that loop, you see it there, and then it starts back west-northwestward. We're now into Friday afternoon, Friday night, Saturday morning, 8 a.m., and you'll notice that the track at this point is north-northeast, and it is further east than the mid-cycle run last night, and it's might even be further east than the run before that. So the GFS suggests that you will have, and the GFS has a much stronger system, so perhaps it's responding to what's going on in the higher levels for steering rather than the lower, which would make sense. And when we look at the upper air on the GFS, you'll notice, you still have, and I'm just backing this up now to Friday, you have troughing up here. Now, at this point, the ridge out in the Atlantic back to Florida still has it cradled, and you can see that really tight coil of circles here. That's Jose, and then the ridge breaks apart. Now you see how the ridge is anchored east-west here, even though it's very narrow. Jose breaks through that little narrow area. So the GFS is saying that that little ridge, that skinny little ridge, is not going to be strong enough to hold it back, and it breaks right through it and splits the ridge in half, and then moves on out to the northeast. And I would say that still, to me, would be the more likely scenario through all of this, rather than the westward track, if only because of the fact that you've got that troughing that's up in the northeast. That it's just enough. It's subtle. It's weak. We actually had a deeper trough in the northeast with Irma that Irma did not respond to, because the ridge to the north was that narrow ridge that was protecting it from those westerlies was so much stronger than this one is, and that that made a very huge difference with respect to Irma in a lot of ways. We have to see again if that ridge is being underplayed by the models, but the GFS at least is insistent that that is not going to be the case, and that it will split the ridge and go right through. So I hope you guys saw how that ridge just kind of almost parts like the Red Sea and creates that opening to go to the north. Let me just at this point, I'm going to say quick hellos to everybody. We have James, NASCAR fan from North Belmore. Thank you. You're a neighbor, not a next door neighbor, but you are a neighbor here. And Philip Bazanka is on. Good to see you here. And I did get some much needed rest yesterday. Thank you. It was definitely much needed. John Sachs, but there's no chance of remnant low wandering into the Gulf and regenerating. No, I think the upper air low is the models all forecast that upper air low to start moving to the northeast. If it were to drop into the Gulf of Mexico, that would change that would be a game changer possibly for Jose. But none of the models show that happening. That doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't get a surprise, but it's highly unlikely. Is a low from the Atlantic? We are due a few this year. Joker's tangent. Clarify that a little bit. I'm not quite getting your, the low is the low from the Atlantic. We are due a few this year. I'm not sure which one you're referring to. So if you could please clarify. And the fishing was good on Sunday. Caught a couple of bass. No green hornet. I do not think these were man-made. Okay, we really kind of need to get away from, all this nonsense, this conspiracy nonsense, because that's what it is. Bryce, right now, I would, of course, we're going to watch it and pay attention to it, but right now the odds I think favor Jose turning northeastward and then northward. Now we're going to still, I'm still going to be curious to see what the verdicts are from the European. Which, by the way, the overnight run of the European was way out, okay, not even close, way out to sea, and turns it out to sea a lot faster than the other models do. But I still have some remaining questions with regard to the, what kind of system are we exactly going to be dealing with? Is it going to wind up weakening with all this shear, and then you have a weaker tropical storm that might be able to gravitate further west? Or is it going to maintain this sort of minimal hurricane status, and then the shear is going to relax and perhaps it strengthens a bit late this week, and that kind of gives it that punch to fly through the ridge and move up offshore and out to sea. No problem, John Sachs. No problem at all. So that pretty much is it in a nutshell for today. We'll keep you updated with all the developments with when the European comes in, and also I'd be curious to see what the UKMET does, the British model, being that it also was an outperformer with Irma. So I kind of want to pay attention to that. So let's look for the possibilities here with regards to strength of system. Is it going to be stronger or weaker? Is it going to be able to punch through that ridge? Is the trough in the northeast overdone? Or you know what? Maybe it's underdone and it winds up turning out to sea sooner. So there's a lot of variability here at this point. And again, I would, from what I'm seeing right now, I would tend to lean to the idea that this will not be an issue and that it will wind up going out to sea. But I still have some doors open in my mind, and we will address those a little bit later on. I'll do some website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com and Angry Ben, my compatriot, on nycweathernow.com for the New York City perspective, and he also has his opinions on Hurricane Jose. So you might want to check those out. And if you're new to my YouTube channel, welcome, and do please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. And you'll be notified when these live streams come on. And we did a lot of live streams when Irma was running around. So hit that subscribe button. All right, folks, have a great day. We will talk to you. I'll see what happens when I come home tonight. If I'm strong enough, I'll do another live stream then. Have a great day.